Hello and welcome to the Future of Work Expo presented by Staples Canada. My name is Dr. Gillian Mandich, and I'm so excited to be here today with you talking all about happy employees in the evolving workspace. I'm also really excited because I'm joined today by Jessica, who's the merchandising manager at Staples Promotional Products. And we're going to really dive deep into the science of happiness and really look at how it impacts the workplace. Because as you can see on the screen here, a salesperson's happiness has been proven to increase sales by 37%. So this is something that's really important. And as a happiness researcher, this is something that I really like to talk about, is to sort of set the tone by first really focusing on the science of happiness. And if you're wondering what that is, or maybe you've never even heard of it, it's because it's a fairly new field. As you can see here, there wasn't really a lot of peer-reviewed research on happiness up until about the 1990s. And what we've seen since then is this plethora of research really focusing on the benefits of happiness. And happiness, yes, it's a cute emoji, and yes, it feels good, but it's so much more than that. There's so much more to the conversation. When we compare happy people to unhappy people are physically healthier. So they have lower rates of cardiovascular disease. They have stronger immune systems. They heal faster from injury. They live longer, they sleep better, and they tend to make better nutritional choices. So there are so many benefits in terms of happiness, and the effect is very significant. So much so that I think all of us here today can agree that smoking is bad for us, right? We know, and it's not just like maybe it's a little bit bad. We know that smoking has a major detrimental effect on our physical health. So as bad as smoking is for us, the effect size of that, happiness acts like it increases our health by that much. So the effect size is really, really large. And it even goes beyond our physical health. Again, when we're comparing happy people to unhappy people, in the workplace, we see benefits like happy people are more cooperative, they're better problem solvers, they're better team players, they're more creative. And we even see benefits in our personal life as well. Happy people are more likely to donate both their time and or their money to charity. They're more altruistic. They tend to have longer and more fulfilling marriages and friendships and relationships, and they tend to make more money. And what's really exciting about happiness, sometimes when I tell people I'm a happiness researcher, people will say to me, and Gillian, I don't really want to focus on my happiness because I care about other people and I want to take care of others. And what we know from the research is that happiness is actually one of the most selfless things that you can do. Because when you're happier, not only do you see the benefits that I talked about, but our happiness, and we see this is research out of Harvard, shows that our happiness actually spreads 3 degrees from us. So when we focus on our happiness and we're feeling good, it affects the people that we meet and the people that they meet. So the people that we work with and our customers, or our family and the people that they meet. So they're really, it's more than just that feel-good moment. It's something that's really important. Now, this is actually a picture of my puppy, Jocko, and he's got this confused look on his face because he's wondering, and you may be as well, is happiness just something that we're born with? We know those people that are sort of more the Eeyore type people, right? I'm just not a very happy person. And well, we do know that there is a genetic element to happiness, absolutely. And I think especially during the pandemic, we can all agree, and we do see this in the research, that our environment plays a significant role in our happiness. But there's actually a third piece that's very meaningful and very significant. And what we know about is that piece we can actually increase. So we can learn skills by focusing on that third piece, which is our thoughts, our actions, and our behaviors. And when we do that, we can actually increase our happiness. Now, before we get into some of the tools and strategies today, I really just wanted to take a moment to talk about rethinking happiness, because so often we think I will be happy when, fill in the blank, right? When I have X amount of dollars, when I have this car, all of those things. But what we know from research is that we don't ever arrive at happiness. It's not an endpoint. It's not a destination. It's a means to a life well lived. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is that a happy life means that we practice happiness regularly. It's just like Jocko here, he's got his weight. So imagine Jocko went to the gym, or you went to the gym today and you exercised. You would never leave the gym and think, okay, I've reached fitness. I don't have to exercise again, right? We know that if we want to be fit and healthy and strong, we have to move our bodies on a regular basis. Or you would never drink the green smoothie that you see on the screen here and say, you know what, Gillian, I've reached nutritional wellness. I don't have to eat, right? We know that a healthy life means that we have to do things and choose healthy foods on an ongoing basis. And what happens is when we do that, we essentially see growth in our happiness muscle. So our highs get higher and we start to get stronger. Just like when you go into the gym and you exercise, you get stronger over time. happiness, our muscle essentially grows over time. And we're going to touch a little bit later on a couple things that we can actually do to help grow that muscle. But first, I just wanted to take one moment to talk about this idea of autonomy. So autonomy is this fancy research term for focusing on what we can control. And I think especially right now where there's so much going on in the world that we can't control, taking the time to focus on what we can control is really important. And so much so that autonomy, focusing on what we can control, is more of a predictor of our happiness than how much money we have, how good looking we are, how good our sex life is, or how popular we are. And we even see benefits in the workplace. So we see that people that find areas that they have control, and that's not to say that they have control over everything, but focusing their attention on where they do have control is positively related to job satisfaction. So you might be wondering, okay, well, that's great, like focusing on what I can control, but how do I actually do that? And so asking yourself, what are those things that we can control? And especially we're talking about the workplace today, right? So thinking about in the workplace, where are those areas of opportunity where I do have control? And one of those is really about your first impression, right? We can't control what other people think of us, but we can control how we make an impact, especially at the first time we meet somebody, because that's the thing that plants a seed that allows people to start to get to know us. And our first impression is something that we can really do and have a profound impact on how people perceive us. And I'm actually going to welcome Jessica in right now, and she's going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that we can control.
Great. Thanks, Gillian. I appreciate it. As Gillian mentioned at the beginning, my name is Jessica. I am the merchandising manager at Staples. So my role here really is to curate product specific for companies. And Gillian beautifully touched upon the fact that happiness and, things tie into productivity. And when we come to new associates and onboarding, it's really about how do we tie those people into our company and engage them and get them really to believe about our philosophy and be happy. And one way we can do that is with onboarding kits and really take something that speaks to the company and what their mantra is and pass that along to the associates so that they have a real big tie-in. And when we see a tie-in to that company and happiness, there's actually more productivity. And you can see by these beautifully curated kits and how they can speak to different companies in different ways.
Thank you, Jessica. Now, we're talking about the workplace today, and this is something that I spend a lot of time in my research focusing on. So I was actually the co-lead investigator of the Canadian Happiness at Work study that I did in partnership with the Canadian Mental Health Association. And this study was done just before the pandemic in January and February of 2020. And what we found at that time, so this is before all of the complications of the pandemic entered the equation, then we saw that less than half of participants, this is over 1,100 Canadians that were in the study, less than half of them felt physically and mentally healthy at work. And this is really concerning because what we know from the research is that happy people perform better. We see this consistently, that people that experience greater positive affect, which is a fancy research word for happiness, they have better outcomes in the workplace than unhappy people. And by outcomes, I mean things like they get higher earnings, they perform better, they even get more favorable evaluations from their supervisors. They're also more likely to help their coworkers or their customers, even in the community, to donate blood or to donate money to their charity or to volunteer more. So when we look at how our happiness impacts specifically in the workplace, what we see is that it's correlated with so many of the good things that we want to see in ourselves and our employees and our colleagues and our coworkers. And happiness, we see it's correlated with job performance, even after we control for things like how old people are, how long they've been with the organization, how much education they have. Even after all of that, happiness still, we're seeing an impact. We see things like, for example, supervisors judge happy employees more favorably than unhappy employees. Sales managers that have happy employees, they rate their employees as higher performing. And we even see it in sport. Cricket players that are happy, they perform better during games. And even in school, MBA students that got ratings from the professors, the happier students were rated better. Now, this might be counterintuitive when we're often told, remember how I talked about happiness is not a destination, it's a practice, right? But we think that we will arrive at happiness. Another thing that we tell in our story, in our head often, is that if I work really hard and I'm successful, then I'll be happy, right? But what we see from the research is that it's actually the opposite. Happiness precedes, so it comes before and it leads to career success. So it isn't just a matter of one day we arrive at happiness if we work really hard. No, we actually see that when we're happier, we're more successful at work and we're more successful long-term as well.
One way we can actually help develop, the happy workplace is this is what I love to call surprise and delight. So we've actually curated a specific package to have a taco night. And you can do this virtually. You can do this at your workplace if there's a kitchen. But what these images show here are really the unpacking of a taco night in a box. It has all the ingredients that you would need to basically create this virtual or in-person event with a team and to build that bonding between the group and really build that connection between everyone. And the interesting thing is that we have so many different generations, different age groups. And one way we can do that is through food. Everyone loves food, and so we really keep the connection together with each other. And if you go on to the next slide, we just have a little bit of a diagram here in terms of, this was done virtually. It had all the spices. We did a custom apron here with a logo so that someone can remember what they did that night and keep it as a keepsake.
I love that. I remember, I forget if it was in a movie or something. People said that they called tacos corned beef smileys. And so even the tacos themselves, I love that. And what fun ideas, because a lot of our happiness actually comes down to how we see things. So right now on the screen, you can see a picture. And I would love, if you're watching, to share in the chat, if you're comfortable, what you see on the screen right now. And it's not a trick question. Just take a look and share what you see in the chat. Now, what's interesting is we're all looking at the same slide, right? But if we choose to focus on the red part of the slide, we see two faces. But if we choose to focus on the white part, we see a vase. And so what's interesting is that we're all looking at the same image, but depending on where we look, it impacts what we see. So that's just kind of how our brain works. There's so much going on in the world. We cannot pay attention to everything. And so what we choose to focus on and how we see things is really important. And it does impact our happiness. Now, that's on a good day. Now we're in a pandemic. It's been going on for a long time. We are tired. We are burnt out. And so it gets even harder when we have a low battery, when we're feeling drained, when we're feeling tired, when we've been homeschooling our kids, when we've been trying to work remotely and balance all of those challenges with our workplace and with our teams. And so, although we've never actually been in a global pandemic like this before, I think we can all agree that we're in a very stressful and difficult time. And so, another example in recent history of a stressful and difficult time was back in 2008. Do you remember back then when we had a major financial crisis, right? So not a pandemic, but both very difficult and stressful, challenging times. And so during this period, back in 2008, researchers went in and they studied bankers during the financial crisis. And what they found, not surprisingly, was that most of the bankers were really stressed out. I mean, who wouldn't be? You're in a banking crisis, right? But they found that there was this subgroup of bankers that were actually pretty happy and resilient, even in the midst of financial chaos. And so the researchers thought, well, that's really interesting. And they wondered, do these resilient, we'll call them resilient bankers, do they have something in common? Were they all just born with this natural gene to make them more resilient during stressful times? And so what the researchers found was that it had nothing to do with their education level. It had nothing to do with how long they had worked at the company. It had nothing to do with any of those things. There was only one thing that separated or was different between, we'll call them like the stressed out bankers and the resilient bankers. And do you know what that was? Well, the resilient bankers, they didn't see a problem as a threat. They saw it as a challenge to overcome. So it's the exact same situation, but they looked at it differently. So remember I showed you the picture of the vase and the faces, right? Same situation, but what you focus on and how you see things impacts how you navigate, especially during difficult or challenging times. Now, you may be wondering, like my puppy Jocko, were those people just wired differently? Is it just a case of, maybe these people were just born to see things as a challenge, not as a threat? And so the researchers actually did a second follow-up study. And what they found was that no, this is not something that you're just hardwired in with at birth. It can be learned. So in this second study, what the researchers did was they showed I called them normal bankers here. I was calling them stressed out bankers here, but the people that were really having a difficult time during the crisis, they showed them a video. And it was a strictly educational video. And all it did was it taught the bankers how to see a challenge as a problem as a challenge, not as a threat. So they were helping them to see the situation through a different lens. And when they did that, what they found was that there was a 23% drop in stress in the stressed out bankers. They also saw an increase in their happiness, and they saw an increase in their work engagement. And so I think that this is something that we can really take and learn, especially in this pandemic right now. How we look at things and the lens that we see things through is really important. Earlier, when I talked about autonomy, right, this idea of focusing on what we can control. Well, we cannot control what's going on during this pandemic. We can control where we're giving our attention and what we're focusing on. Are we seeing what's going on as a challenge or as a threat? How are we perceiving things, and what are we choosing to focus on? Because those things have a really big impact on how we navigate things, especially when things are difficult and stressful. So that's something that when we think about, okay, how do I focus on my happiness? How do I build that happiness muscle like I talked about, especially during difficult times? Another big key piece of this is connection. And connection is a very, very big piece of our happiness equation. So much so that research out of Harvard found that social connection is the number one predictor of both our long-term health and our happiness. So above things like how much money we have, where we live in the world, do we live in warm climates, cold climates? Is it, how many kids do we have? If we have any, are we married? Are we divorced? Where do we work? What is our education level? Above all of those factors and everything else, the number one thing that impacts both our long-term health and our happiness is social connection. And I think especially in this time where we're navigating this remote hybrid work environment and we can't necessarily all be together in the office or with our friends, reminding ourselves that even though we physically may have to be distant or things look a little bit different, we don't actually have to be close in order to feel close. So does this require us to get creative? Yes. Does this require us to figure out how to use Wi-Fi and the internet as tools to help us with our communication? Absolutely. And it's really important. And I think that, and I really wanted to include this because I think, especially when our to-do lists get really long and things get really busy, sometimes those social things can be the first thing to drop off our list, right? Whether it be, having a catch-up call with someone at work that you normally would have seen them, but you're working remotely, and just picking up the phone and having a quick conversation. Or whether at the end of the day, you want to check in on a friend or send a message to someone and just say, hey, how are you doing today? Knowing that we have to get creative, but it's so important. Even though it's not like necessarily a tangible outcome like some of our other workplace outcomes, it's really important to remind ourselves that the number one predictor of both our long-term health and our happiness is social connection. And like I talked about, when we're happier, not only do we feel better, we see the benefits in our physical health, we see the benefits in our workplace performance, and we see the benefits in our personal life. Now, another thing that we can do, and this is one of my favorite, so I did my PhD at Western University, and I used to do a lot of research with university students. And in one of my studies, what I did was I taught students different tools and skills associated with happiness for 4 weeks. And at the end of it, I asked them, what was your favorite tool or strategy that you learned? And by far, this was the number one tool that the students told me was their favorite. And what I mean by practicing gratitude, and I'd actually love for you to share in the chat if you've ever practiced gratitude or if gratitude practice is part of your life right now. Because I will say that especially in the past few years, it's becoming much more common and popular, which makes me really happy. Now, what a gratitude practice is basically just taking time, ideally every single day, to think about things in your life that you're thankful for, to think about things in your life that you appreciate. That's it. And what I love about gratitude is it doesn't take a lot of time. It can be done anywhere, and it doesn't cost a penny. So what I would love for you to do right now in the chat is share with me one thing that you're grateful for. It can be anything. It can be something that's going on at work. It can be something that happened to you today. It could be a person in your life. It could be something that you learned during our time here today together. Anything at all, just one thing that you're grateful for. And by doing that, you have now practiced gratitude today. And it didn't take a lot of time, but the benefits are very significant. So much so that this is actually one of my favorite research studies that I've ever read. And in this study, researchers looked at people that practiced gratitude and they compared them to people that won the lottery. Now, I think we can all agree that we would be really happy today if we won the lottery, right? And so researchers studied people that won the lottery. This is the green bar that you see on the screen here. And if you look at time point one, so at the beginning of the study, the people that won the lottery were happy. Not shocking information, right? But what the researchers did was they followed those lottery winners over a 6-month period. And what you'll notice is the green bar has a negative slope, right? It's slowly starting to go down and down and down. Now you may be thinking, why is that? If I won the lottery, I'd have a lot of money and I'd be happy. But think about it. If you won the lottery today, you'd be so happy. And then if you hit fast forward on your life and you went to 2 or 3 or 4 months down the road, are you getting out of bed every morning thinking, oh my goodness, I am so happy I won the lottery 3 months ago? No, we're adaptive creatures. That is one of the features of being a human. We get used to things. And so even though that the winning the lottery initially brought us a boost in happiness, over time, we don't see that boost lasting because we adapt to it. We get used to having the money. We get used to spending the money, and we don't appreciate it as much as we did at the beginning when it was new. Now, the second part of the study, this is the blue bar. This is my favorite part of the study. So the second group of people were non-lottery winners. So they had not won the lottery. And with this group, the researchers taught them how to practice gratitude. So every single day, they had to write down things that they were grateful for. And what you see is at the beginning of the study, they're not that happy, but over time, what's happening? The bar is going up and up and up. Around the halfway mark, just past the halfway mark, we see an intersection. So we see that the people that practice gratitude and the lottery winners are equally as happy. And then if we look at the very end here, what we see is that the people that practice gratitude are statistically significantly happier than the people that won the lottery. I remember when I talked about focusing on what we can control and what we can't, right? We cannot control if we win the lottery, unless if you can, then please send me a DM privately and we'll have a conversation. But we can't control if we win the lottery, right? But we can control if we take 2 minutes every single day to think about things that we're grateful for, or in a best case scenario, to write down things that we're grateful for. And we can remind ourselves that by doing that, we can actually be happier than if we won the lottery. Now, if this was an in-person talk, usually around this point, someone puts up their hand and they say, Gillian, well, what about if I practice gratitude and I win the lottery? And I guess that's one of the benefits of research, is that we can keep continuing to do studies. So that's kind of going to be a cool study to look for in the future. Now, with gratitude, how it works is not just like one day you wake up and you're grateful. It's a slow change over time, but they add up to big results. So on the screen here, you can see some pictures of strawberries. And if you look on the far end here, this is the first generation of the iPhone. And I don't know about you, but do you remember getting your first smartphone? I remember, I think I had a BlackBerry actually, but I would take pictures of everything. And I thought it was the greatest thing in the world that I could take pictures on my phone. And then if we start, and this only goes up to the 6th generation of the iPhone. I think we're at like 13 now or something. So it's even better. But each generation of the iPhone, what's happening with the strawberries, right? The colors are getting a little bit more vivid. They're getting a little bit sharper, a little bit brighter. That's how gratitude works. Over time, things start to shift. You start to see things a little bit differently, a little bit sharper, a little bit brighter, a little bit more vivid. But if you look back, the changes add up when they're done consistently over time. Now, you might be wondering, okay, Gillian, well, what questions do I have to ask in order to practice gratitude? Is there a best question to do? Is there a best way to do it? And the answer is, the best way is the best way for you, whatever you connect with. I've put some examples of different gratitude questions on the screen here. Feel free to take a picture, to screenshot it, just as prompts. It could be anything else. But remember how I talked about in that lottery winner study, how over time we adapt? So the key piece to gratitude is that it's not so much what you focus on that you're grateful for, it's that you mix it up from time to time. So maybe one day you think about amazing things that have happened to you. Maybe like us here today together on this at the Future of Work Expo talking. Maybe that's an amazing thing that happened to you today. And then tomorrow you focus on maybe different body parts that you're grateful for, or people that you're grateful for, or skills. It doesn't matter. As long as you mix it up. And you don't need to mix it up every day. You can focus on one question for a couple of days and then switch it. You can go back to different questions. It's just that not asking the exact same question every single day. That's key. And then the other piece of it is, in like a good, better, best situation, it's really good to think about what you're grateful for. But if you really want to maximize the impact of your gratitude practice, write it down. Take a pen to paper, take out your phone, open up a Word document, however you want to write it. It doesn't matter if it's electronic or written, but actually putting into words what you're grateful for can really help to increase the profound impact that the practice has. Now I'm just going to turn it back over to Jessica here to sort of tie this all together for us.
Awesome. Gillian, I love how you talk about the shift. And over this pandemic, I think we've seen a shift in how we think about purchasing local or supporting our local charities. And one really interesting way that we can do that is partner with a local Indigenous artist or any artist in your community. Here we just happen to have Patrick Hunter, who is a two-spirited Ojibwe artist, and he's also a member of the CGLCC, which is really, really interesting. And the fact that we're able to showcase his artwork on product and partner with other companies, I think is such a beautiful thing. Or the fact that we also have McHappy Day socks, and I believe a $5 donation for these socks, and then the rest goes back to Ronald McDonald House. And how good does that feel to be able to purchase something like that or receive it as well? I think it's just such a wonderful piece that really speaks to that gratitude. So hopefully that tied it up for everyone. Gillian, thank you so much for your time today. It was amazing hearing you listen. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. And I believe we have a Q&A at the end now. And so if you have any questions, please put them in the chat.